I get dozens of requests to talk about Black Mirror, and the reason I never have is because for every great episode exploring various social themes on technology, I find there to be too many repetitive concepts that bring out the worst in a series that clearly wasn't intended to last this long. With the thankless demand of annual appearances due to Netflix's acquisition of the show, I feel it's gradually succumbed to the pressure of trying to keep originality at the expense of subtlety, to the point that it fringes on reducing itself to plainly about evil technology and philosophical meandering survived by vapid pop culture pandering. It's a show where I'm left either thinking, oh well, that was insightful and interesting, or halfway through thinking, I get it, cookies are the work of the fucking devil, but I don't want to sit here and behave negatively towards a show that's, well, really all about negativity when you think about it. So instead, I want to talk about what I feel is Black Mirror's most undervalued episode. Most of you are still caught up on the whole vapid pop culture pandering thing, aren't you? Let's talk about it. Metalhead, the 5th episode of the 4th season of Black Mirror, was one of the true, genuine breaths of fresh air I felt this series needed in recent memory. It's a relatively restrained and nuanced sci-fi thriller that sees a woman named Bella travel across a desolate post-apocalyptic England in search of a way home after the world has become ravaged by pissed-off doggy robots indicative of the big dog military quadrupeds by Boston Dynamics, a robotics firm that will one day be our future Skynet. In typical Charlie Brooker fashion, it's a viciously cynical story that leaves you questioning why you decided to watch all your irrational fears and anxieties manifest on screen. Although, unlike the arbitrary moral and existential exposition and undertones of the usual Black Mirror episode, this story is told predominantly through a minimalist execution, while still littering it with obligatory moral and existential themes that at least aren't exceptionally on the nose. It relies on a very short, clean-cut plot structure reminiscent of the Terminator and Jewel, in that it's a relentlessly aggressive chase sequence where hope actually seems possible before the inevitable kick in the bollocks that brings you back to Brooker's sinister version of her feeble reality. What Metalhead does differently is depend exclusively on being as visceral as possible. It rejects a lot of the contrivances of other episodes, and instead focuses purely on the raw, uncompromising emotional human experience that we all relate to. Of course, there are many Black Mirror episodes that arguably share the same type of experience, but Metalhead just feels like this abrupt purgatorial intermission that encapsulates our core psychological weaknesses. While it might not be overtly psychological, the story expresses a painful sympathy for Bella, where you can easily put yourself in her modest personality and ponder the what if of what you would actually do if being hunted across uncivilized terrain that once felt safe to you. There is something that feels sincerely human about watching Bella trying to escape what is both figuratively and literally a representation of death. Whether you see it as some allegory on the impact of military development on innocent lives, or, in my case, see it as facing the fact that it is impossible to escape your problems without practical solutions, the story's naturalistic approach to representing reality makes it very clear from the outset that there is no fictional deus ex machina or dramatic intervention coming to save the day. All Bella has is her own smarts to outmaneuver technology designed with intelligence and speed that humans don't have because we're suppressed by our emotions and natural biology. That is the key concept to the story. It's not about fear-mongering our paranoia towards technology, but rather it's about how we self-construct our fears and weaknesses towards things that are ultimately our fault. Our ability to think and feel contradicts our ability to make blunt binary choices and actions. So Metalhead shows us the outcome of trying to achieve some sort of impossible perfection by living vicariously through things we designed to achieve what we can't physically or emotionally do. But, of course, That's not to say our creations don't inherit our flaws as well, whether indirectly or not. Essentially, the premise of creating robots without the ability to logically process moral rights and wrongs that, in their own right, are also socially constructed, means that there's no organic way for robots to know the difference between a good or bad person. What stops us from just getting up and killing each other is how we've culturally defined norms and values that are passed through generations to allow society to function normally. But then there's the deviant minority who present an anomaly that hinders the smooth running of a positive world. Robots are thus the antithesis of humanity. They represent that cold, impersonable, uncaring side within our subconscious that we don't act upon. They are what we as humans have agreed internally not to be, and so they effectively serve to right our perceived wrongs, even if what's right and wrong is broadly subjective to different types of people. Bella conveys a human innocence most of us identify with, and the thing about her story is that there's no immediate choice to simply walk away from danger. She's firmly in the midst of it without any control over the scenario, establishing a persistent urgency that's so tangible to the journey. The gritty black and white aesthetic not only reinforces this oppressively metallic vibe under the dominance of a species we created to ironically benefit our lives, but it also gives Bella's ordeal a dreamlike quality. You could see Metalhead as a more meditative experience within the world of Black Mirror. It's quieter and emptier, if indeed without the actual breathing room from the dangers of the series' trademark nihilism. At the same time, it completely strips away the artifice of Black Mirror's fiction. We see rawness and empathy in the characters' expressions that allow us to understand them and their relationships with characters who we never meet. It depends so much on the viewer to humanly relate and read the characters without context, and seeing Bella talk to static on the radio doesn't simply mean hope is lost, but rather it doesn't matter if anyone's listening. She's personally trying to believe that hope is still there in her darkest moment. It's the closest thing we have to reassurance when it comes to the ambiguity of this world. In her final scene, she has accepted her fate without ever truly giving up and succumbing to death. While she knows the inevitable is coming, there's a glimmer of confidence found as she tries to remove the tracking devices now implanted into her body. She's willing to come to terms with death as this inherent and unstoppable part of her life in the most aggressive sense that she's partially desensitized by it, given she's witnessed the deaths of so many people she cares for. Bella represents that human strength to fight through weakness that's so very easy to fall victim to. She tries to hide her pain, a very real pain that's both physical and emotional. Metalhead reinforces that constant internal battle. Sure, at face value it's about a human being hunted by a monster, but our brief time with Bella shows that she's rejecting emotional destruction that have led to many other people's demise to hold on what's left of humanity in what is seen as some sort of moral test. There is hope found in her resilience to keep moving in the face of a seemingly invincible opposition that tries to exploit her weaknesses as she tries to exploit it back. It's a battle of the fittest now that the food chain has reset itself, and I find it bewildering that I was so uncomfortable despite how very little violence actually occurs. There's a lot of spontaneous deaths to represent the swift efficiency of the dogs, but those blink and you miss it moments are enough to leave you with a lasting impression of the dog's fierce power and determination. In fact, I was genuinely horrified when the dog decided to pick up a fucking knife and turn the whole episode into a psycho-inspired slasher movie. Sure, Bella is never hurt by the knife, but just the potential presented perpetuates the human fallibility of our emotions. Our imagination ends up wandering because we're so sensitive to danger, despite our coldness towards media that tolerates the violence and fears we don't want to experience in real life. Metalhead is a perfect play on fiction becoming reality. It isn't groundbreaking or genius to any extent, but there's a lot to be said about a concept so simple. I find myself more fascinated by a world that I never fully see. There's no exposition for you, no jargon to make you feel intelligent. Instead, its sophistication is found in what you get out of it beyond what it merely presents. I think it's wonderfully consolidated in those final moments. When we return to the warehouse where the characters were initially in search of something, it was a life or death journey for an item that conventionally wasn't worth life or death. It was something so excruciatingly simple yet profoundly symbolic. A teddy bear for a sick, scared child, a metaphor for our human innocence, emotion, and comfort. It's something we far too often take for granted, and with this revelation, one thing is made very clear to the viewer. For a toy perceived as trivial and redundant in the context of a world that has fallen apart, in the mind of someone in need of hope, it holds a special secrecy, giving us the only true, tangibly soft and comfortable stimuli to an episode devoted to rust, decay, and death. Hi everyone, thank you for spending the time watching this video. I have to know in the comments below what your favourite Black Mirror episode is. And if you enjoyed this episode and you want to get early access, vote on what the next video could be, just like this one, and even get your name in the credits, and access an exclusive Discord chat where you can tell me what you've been watching, what you've been playing, what you've been reading, and help me grow a community, please do consider heading over to Patreon, where for just a few dollars a month, you can help me to grow this show into hopefully something more. And as always, follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Stay safe, and I'll see you all very, very soon. Bye.